Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Untethering Shame podcast, where we're all here to explore just how deep shame embeds itself into our lives and what we can do to unravel ourselves from its grasp. Today, we're talking about the role of shame that pushes us to be the doers and beers, the role we assume of having to do and be everything for everyone else to feel worthy of being in the room, and what it means when we can't. I'm super fortunate to be having this conversation with my amazing sister-in-law and best friend, Jessica Meisner, where we'll be both turning inward and exploring that pressure tank that's constantly on high inside of each of us for everything that we're not doing, being, or contributing, and the ways that we constantly tell ourselves we're not enough. In true human giver fashion, Jessica has acquired a lot of roles in her life. She's a daughter, partner, mother, business owner, consultant, friend, and so much more. She can tell you everything that it means to be in those roles, who she has to be, the pressure she holds, the work to be done. But when you ask Jessica, who are you, independent of these roles, like many of us, the air grows still with uncertainty and distress. Jessica has spent her life raising children, both as a mom and as the owner of several learning centers where she works with babies and kids all day long, and assuming the role of fixer, not only for the children in her life, but the adults too. Like Oprah, she hands out her time and energy like there's an endless supply, and in true giver fashion, deals herself last, which is a tactic her shame uses to make sure there isn't enough left for her ever to show up for herself. She toes the line between feeling ashamed and selfish, yet resentful and righteous in her anger, feeling like she deserves to take care of herself, not seeing that the only real obstacle to this claim is her. And like many of us, she's tired of existing in that space. She wants to learn how to live in alignment with her values, to still be the person others can count on and that she can show up for, but without losing herself in the process. But like many of you listening, there's always that doubt-ridden question that plagues us when we enter this space of exploration. Is it even possible? And do I deserve it? So without further ado, let's dive in. Jess, I think, nervous, excited. This is very personal, obviously, because I am just like you in a lot of these ways. So I'm a little bit like, I don't know what we're signing up for, but I'm so happy that you're here today.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here. I've never done a podcast before. First time for everything. And yeah, you got me choking up already. That I knew that was going to happen. Hearing things about myself, tricky. It's a tricky one to navigate. So that one's already got me like a little emotional.
Yeah. And when you know that you have to stay quiet, so you can't reject what I'm saying. Like when someone compliments you and you push it away, or someone says something like, oh no, but it's fine. But you can't say that because you're like, well, she's got to get her intro out. So let her finish that before I say something. Okay. So before we jump in, I like to start every episode with the same question. If you could describe how you feel right now in one word, what would it be?
In one word? I would say vibrating.
I
think, I think because I
like
there's a lot of different things rolling around. Like it's, I definitely don't feel nervous. This is, not our first conversation. We've had thousands of them for hours on end. But to be, honing in on this specific topic that is so loaded that it's just, there's just so much to say. So there's so many ideas and scenarios that are just rolling around in my head right now that I would say I'm vibrating on high, we'll say.
Yeah. Well, and what we're talking about is literally the thing that our shame brains spend all of their energy trying to get us to be too busy to talk about. So the fact that we're taking the space to do this, your brain's going to be simultaneously buzzing with, oh my gosh, I really want to talk about this, but also, oh my gosh, we can't talk about this.
Oh my gosh, I have to talk about this?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Right. I'm just kidding. I have an appointment. Did you hear that? That dog and the kid and
there's a lot of stuff going on outside my door right now. I gotta go check on that.
Go. Yeah. Okay, so tell me though, because I let you kind of lead the way in terms of what we might want to talk about. And there was this knowing that this topic was important. And so even though there's that part of you that's going to be like, I'm in knots, I don't want to do this, I'm uncomfortable, I want to deflect and sort of reject going to certain places. Why does this topic feel important for you to talk about today?
I think that having the hard conversations in general is important because we need to normalize the conversations. We need to, get rid of the stigma of I'm weird because this is happening to me, or, I'm an other because my situation is different, or maybe just the fact that other people are going through these same things, but nobody knows about it because nobody talks about it. So having the conversations, I think, is just really important.
Yeah, it makes me think about, so I was one of my book clubs a few times back, we read the book All About Love. And one of the things that's talked about in there that kind of happens to many of us as we grow up, mostly as kids, but as we grow up, is the sort of normalized dysfunction that we replace love with. And so we accept all kinds of behaviors, abuse, insecure attachments, these, well, I hit you because I love you. I yelled at you because I love you. All these different things. And we start to accept that as love. And I think what you're describing is the normalized dysfunction in being a doer. And so us talking about this is the need to talk about the systemic issue of, and you and I are both cisgender females. We were raised in a patriarchal society, whereas women, our jobs are to be sort of these silent sufferers and the human givers. And so that doesn't mean that someone that doesn't identify as a cisgender female doesn't experience that, but that's sort of the lens that you and I have both kind of had our stories built on. And so there's that piece of, gosh, we know what it's like to be, I've only been a mom for 3 years. You've been doing this for 18, but it is the mom role, the life role, the partner role, the business owner role. It seems like each one has its own rule book that's like encyclopedia level long of like, here's everything you need to do and be. And if you can't do this, you're not good enough. And that's been, you've been staring down the barrel of that for years.
Yes, absolutely. That's something that comes up for me pretty much daily. Going back to that needing to be everything for everyone. And as a female, you not only have this internal dialogue of, I have to do more because I'm female, because I am secondary to my male counterpart, or, not so much in my relationship, I pretty much run the show. So I'm just lucky enough that we can coexist well, but as you know, it took us a really long time to get there and to figure out what those roles meant and what that actually looks like in real life. The other piece of it is always having to kind of have the answers for everybody. And it doesn't matter if you're on video.
The interesting thing for those of you that can't see this, and I may or may not decide to keep this one in, is as she's talking about her other half, he's sauntering in on the floor, bear crawling through to get something so as not to disturb us.
Sneaky.
Which, honestly is more disturbing than if he had walked in just normally. So
I'm sorry. That's why I couldn't not say something. I'm like, you're being an animal on the floor right now. I like it. In and got your workout clothes and left.
Everybody's got a book about being a spy, and they talk about having to sneak. And so, Dave hasn't figured out how to do that.
I was gonna have to let Uncle Dave borrow that book because he's not very good at it.
No. Okay. So going back before that happened, tell me. So you're saying basically you got to this point, but you've been indoctrinated with these messages. You and your partner, for the most part, found your way through it.
Yeah. Every day we're still, journeying down those paths and figuring out what's going to work. But, relationships are always work. But it really, for me, it was a lot of what I saw as I was growing up. So that stuff was ingrained in me as I was growing up that, oh, well, my mom did everything. I mean, dad went to work, it was very stereotypical suburban rural family. And watching that as a child, having our daughter very young, being 19 years old, that's what I had to go on moving forward into raising this child. And so I did take on all of that stuff. Saturdays were the cleaning day, and, it didn't include my partner. It was just me. And at some point, the switch flipped and I said, wait a minute, this isn't right. This is not how this should be going. This isn't the person I am. I'm not a submissive. It's just not who I am. So, that switch flipped and I altogether stopped doing everything. I was still taking care of my daughter. I was worrying about those things. But as far as taking care of my partner, who is a fully capable, functioning man, I was done with that. I was not going to do that anymore. So I went from a completely other end.
Well, and was that out of resentment? Like, now it's a big F you, or was that out of, okay. So it was the pendulum swing. Yeah.
Yes, it was. I went completely to the other end of the spectrum and I said, you know what? Fuck that. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Are these going to be explicit podcasts?
Yes.
I should have asked that I should have asked that from the beginning. So
also, I wouldn't have invited you to be a guest on my podcast if there wasn't swearing, because we both know you can't not do that.
Yeah, so. I can. I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, you can when you're in business
the hard
mode
fast
in front
words.
of little kids. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, no, I can hold my tongue. But it really was that big other end of the spectrum. I went all the way to the other end and I said, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing your laundry. I'm not cleaning your toilet. You are a fully functioning, capable human person. And instead of me having that conversation with him, I just stopped doing things. There was no conversation because there was no conversation for me to base a conversation on. That hadn't happened in my home. So when something came up like that in our home, it was my mom, zipping her lips and I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to cold shoulder. I'm going to just go about my business. I'm going to make plans separate from you. I'm just not going to include you. So for me, that was a default. That was what made sense to I'm just going to stop doing this stuff and I'm going to worry about me and I'm going to worry about Abby, which didn't pan out super great.
Well, also because both sides of that pendulum are about power and control and dominance and control. Because when you were doing everything, on some level, it was about you having to, that is where you have any semblance of worth and value, is taking care of all these things, doing all of these things. But again, sort of the belief that you are subconsciously, at least, lesser. And then you realized, I'm burnt out. Nobody can do all these things. And you have a new kid and you're 19. And so, again, I didn't have a kid till I'm 35 and I still feel ill-equipped mentally and emotionally to do this most days. And maybe
we all do. So that's not exclusive at all. That we all do.
Right. So I was 32. So maybe I was so young, obviously, when I started my parenting journey. And so there was that piece, but you
were a part of parenting though. I mean, you were my right-hand man when something was going on with Abigail. You were the person I called. So, you did get an insight in that. And I hope that you found certain things that you knew you could use raising your own daughter and things that you maybe didn't want to use, because we all know Abby was her own little can of worms. So,
but the thing I think that was interesting is like what you're describing, I think, is a very normal experience that many, and we're going to again speak from the female perspective. So people that are socialized female, this, you are, I mean, from the time you were a little kid, you were probably, playing, somebody was telling you how to play house and playing with these things. And there's certain role
Yes.
playing pieces that come into play.
Yes.
When you're in school, you've got to be the kid that's getting all the grades and doing the things. And we can get into this a little later, but I know your experiences in middle school and high school also really pushed you to feel like me as a person is not someone that someone's just going to accept right off the bat. So I have to either play a part or sort of reject and avoid their approval because I'm not going to get it. So again, sort of the pendulum swings again of power and control. And so then as you are, you're 19, you're becoming a parent on some level, you've been around kids your whole life. Your mom had an in-home daycare. She had the learning center. You knew these things.
Yep.
There was a nurturer in you. And as a mom, you could recognize, okay, this little human needs me to do it, but you didn't have a filter yet for how do I do this with other people? And you witnessed your mom, other adult females doing this in their heteronormative relationships and heteronormative roles, and so then
absolutely,
when you push back, that was your way of trying to regain control by almost punishing him, but in a weird way, it still puts him at the center. He's still in control because what you're doing is about him. And in spite of him, not just saying, this is how I want to be. So they both end up being like, well, I have to do it all. And this, I know we've talked about this before, but it's the drama triangle, which is hero, victim, villain. I'm responsible for everything. It's my fault if something goes wrong. And then the victim role of like, well, nobody gives a shit. So fuck you. And the world sucks. And then you cycle back and forth between all three of these roles until you break out of that. And so it sounds like that's where you were within your relationship without knowing that's where you were.
Absolutely. I knew nothing. We didn't come from a household that talked about emotions, that had big, deep conversations.
Right.
We barely had a sex talk.
Right.
Like we didn't, I figured that stuff out on my own. And it was nothing. It wasn't to say that they weren't trying, but it's it's that continual generational thing that happens every single generation where you're hoping you're getting better each generation, but you're still having to navigate the traumas from the previous generation. And you're still having to navigate the things that your parents grew up learning, and that was what they knew. They got married in the 80s, and back then you married out of high school and you had kids and you raised your family and daddy went to work and mommy took care of the house and all of that stuff was it was still the 1960s essentially, but it was trying to be better.
Right. Well, and I think that's the thing too. So it's interesting when you said that you still kind of run the show, because that ultimately is still the human giver. That is the person, because it's now not, I have to be everything for everybody else. It is on some level, but it's also, there's comfort in me being in control of everything for everybody else. And those are
I definitely, I prefer it.
Yeah, right.
It is definitely my preference. Yes.
It is a safety
other people
mechanism.
Are capable. Well, sure.
Right.
Sure. Yes.
Because if you are responsible for everything and then subsequently in control of everything, you are burnt out, but you are protected from other people letting you down. And you would rather be the one that's responsible for it. And if you fuck up, you can do something about it because you can control that. Right. But if they drop the ball, if they screw up, you can't. Well, and that's too risky.
It is. And if they screw up, I didn't train them good enough. So no matter what, it falls back on me. No matter what the scenario is. And this is something that I, like I said, I think about this stuff every day. And it's not just at work. It's not just at home. It is literally, it's out in the world. It is driving my car by myself. It is, how can you put your best foot forward for everyone else? This is the dialogue that's in my head of what does this individual person need? How can I train them the best way for what they need, for what their, strengths are. And so it's also constantly tapping into, having to read people and having to be aware of what everybody's individual strengths are. I'm not so much doing that with strangers because I don't care that much, but as far as the people in my orbit, I hold myself to this value of, essentially being able to, I may not have all the answers for everyone right now, but I can find them for you. I can do that for you. You need help navigating your relationship. Well, let me do some research for you. Let me look into how that's going to work best for you and the way that you receive and deliver information. I do it constantly with our daughter that regularly doesn't do it for herself. So at some point, I have to stop being that to some degree, but I also enjoy it. So finding that balance is it's tricky.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the differentiation point too between, so there's shame-driven living and values-driven living, and shame-driven living is, I have to do this. I'm not okay if I don't do this. It's almost a compulsion. This is who I have to be, what I have to do. Yes. Values-driven living is, this is what's really important to me. And also recognizing that context of life and balance in life means that sometimes how I live within my values looks different. And I can't do it all the time for everyone in every situation. And I think what you're describing is wanting to get to that point where, it's super important to me to be a listener. It's super important to me to be flexible and to be kind and to show people grace. I also know that I have done that to a point that I don't stand up for myself when something is going on. Because, and then I trick myself into saying that's a good thing because it's a value, because I want to be kind. I want to do this,
you take it to the extreme. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. You take it to the extreme.
You have to make that shift, it sounds like, or you want to make that shift of saying, I don't want to let go of this as something that's important to me, because I like that. I thrive in that sort of learning state, that being there with people state, but I'd like to be okay if it wasn't me. And I'm just going to make a leap here because this is something I'm still struggling with. And be okay when it is me, not being resentful that other people aren't the ones doing it. Because I really fucking suck at that.
Yeah, I'm not very good at that myself. That is one that I think I live in a habitual state of resentment most of my days. Because at the end of the day, no one's doing that for me. They just aren't. And somehow you have to come to terms with the fact that some people aren't capable. Some people just don't have it in them to put that much effort into another person.
Or the way that they're doing it looks different than you would. And it might never measure up to the state of perfection you put on yourself.
That's yes, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Yes.
I say that just to say the example before we started recording of the room you're recording in right now.
Oof.
And describing, so it's an office room / spare room / now Dave, your husband's sort of dressing and staging area.
Collection room.
Yes, exactly. And it's slowly sort of percentage wise taking a bigger proportion. Yeah, exactly. It's mostly Dave's now.
Yeah,
and then sort of the feeling you have of, you're going to have to deal with that when your mom comes to stay and she's going to be in that room, which is 2 months away. And, so you're going to have to make sure that you do something about it. And then we sort of walked it back to talk to Dave about doing something about it. And then I said, well, I don't actually think you need to talk to Dave because he's actually pretty on top of those things. He's probably going to do it by himself because he's aware she's coming, and he is very conscious of other people.
Yes.
But it's not so much, it's that how he would go about that.
He's quietly conscious.
Yes. And it's not 12 steps ahead. And so your trust also comes from the sort of plan in place. And it's you need to know that it's on his radar at the time that it feels important on your radar. And if it's not, your shame codes it as he doesn't care. He's not as invested. This isn't important to him. The same as you are going out of your way to reach out to people, ask them what they need, have these hard conversations. A lot of people aren't going to do that, but your shame brain says, see, because they're not doing that, they don't care as much about you as you care about them. You overinvest in your relationships instead of saying, do I have people in my life that if I were to ask for what I need, instead of talking myself out of it, that they would pick up the pieces? And my guess, and I, again, am projecting this onto you, mostly because I know you and I are very similar humans. The answer is yes.
Yes.
But we really suck at asking for it because you have an A+ in talking yourself out of having any needs that you shouldn't be able to take care of yourself.
Yes. Yeah. I don't want to have to ask. And part of it too, I know. As soon as I said it, I don't want to have to ask. As soon as I said it, I felt it.
Yeah.
That one landed perfectly.
Yep. Good.
So it, and you know, that statement, I don't want to have to ask. That's true. That is a wholehearted, honest, that is a true statement, because when I have to ask, it flips it to, well, so two things. First of all, vulnerability. Vulnerability sucks. It is not my favorite place to be. I hate being in that state. You know this better than anyone I know. So hate that. And also the fact that nobody else has to ask. I see it. I am aware of it. I honestly, sometimes I'm hyper aware of it. And that is exhausting. And when you are continually feeling everyone's feels all the time, which I am every day, all day, I can look at somebody's face and say, something's not right. And then they tell me all the things that aren't right. And then I hold those, and those are mine to hold on to. And for whatever stupid fucking reason, I can't let them go. So I just hold them, and they continue to fill my bucket full of shit until it spills out, and Jessica freaks out and has a meltdown episode and cries for hours and can't talk to anybody for a full 24-hour period. And then everything's fine.
Right. And fine being the operative word. Right.
Yeah. Fine.
So
everything's fine.
There's a couple things I'm going to poke at, and you're going to hate it, but I'm going to do it anyways. So I'm going to say them all, and then you can come back to whatever you want to say about it. So the first one is nobody's asking you to do that. 2, you are co-creating the experience for which other people don't have to think for themselves because you're doing it for them.
Correct.
3, and this one I'm telling you that my therapist told me when I was pregnant with Everly, and I was bitching about something where Jordan was supposed to make a dentist appointment because he never goes to the dentist. It still bothers me, but I've now stopped trying to schedule his appointments for him. But I said something, and I was upset about having to manage all this stuff, and I was irritated about something else. I don't know. I do the same thing that you do, where I'm really good at making the case for him being the biggest piece of garbage on the planet. And then one interaction
Why
would
do you
happen,
suck
and I'm
so
like,
bad? Yep.
But then I go, oh my gosh, he's the most amazing person I've ever met. And that's, that is shame. And so she sort of drop kicked me in the middle of her office by asking me why I feel it's my responsibility to do things that I am complaining that he's capable of doing, and yet I'm not allowing him to do it in a way that matches for him. And then 2, she said, it's interesting because you not asking for what you need tells me nothing about your partner. It tells me everything about how you feel about yourself, because you don't believe you are worthy enough of making the ask, because he's proven to you that he will do that. And so when you say no one will do that for me, I think that is a fear that you have of, if I ask and they don't show up, because you have had experiences like that. I know that. From the time I've been in your life, before I came in your life, anybody listening to this has had those moments where you put yourself out there, your needs aren't met in the ways that we want them to be, or honestly, probably needed them to be. And so now it feels safer to not ask. It feels safer to talk yourself out of it, to sort of become robotic. But now you're taking away the opportunity for people to be there for you, which gives them a sense of empowerment.
Yeah.
So they don't have that. So instead, they subconsciously start to see themselves as being less than you and become a submissive to you because you have to take care of them instead of you having an equal partnership where you both take care of yourselves
Well,
and each other.
maybe that part plays a role too, because the need to be needed falls
Mm-hmm.
very heavy in this realm
Yes.
that we're in right now.
Right.
And that is one of those things that, if they don't need me, what am I here for?
Right.
What
Why
am I
would they choose
doing?
me?
Why would
Yeah,
they? Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
Yeah. Why would they choose me? And I continually, and I have that dialogue pretty constantly running in my head. Um, but it's also, why do they need to choose you? Like, why
Mm,
aren't you enough for you? And,
mm,
my entire adult life, I have been working really hard to figure out who I am and
mhm,
what I'm doing. Um,
mhm,
and I have found parts, and I as a whole, I do enjoy myself. I do like to be with me. I'm,
mhm.
perfectly comfortable being alone, and um that never comes up, but the need to be needed never goes away.
Yeah.
And I can't figure out if that is the noise pollution that's happening around me all the time, because there's always something happening. There's always somebody to concern myself with. There's always, there's 4 people in our home. We have a dog, a cat, a lizard, a foster dog
Mhm,
right now, so there's always something. And on top of it, you have, the business aspect, which is its own
mhm.
set of things. Um, but it regularly comes back in my head of why do you need them to need you so badly?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if this is what's happening for you, but we know that shame is the fear of not belonging, of not having connection, and we know that connection is vital to survival, and so I wonder if on
Mhm.
some way it is very much this innate thing that as humans we need to feel chosen in some way.
Mhm.
And I think over the years, the definition for you or sort of the experience of being needed has gotten very specific to what you do for other people
Mhm.
instead of thinking about who you are as a person and what you gift them by being in the room. And I don't know if do you remember this? It was like, I don't know, maybe 6 months, a year into dating Jordan. And he made some comment to me one day. And I remember just being so pissed. I'm sure I complained to you about it at some point, but it was like, I said something about I needed him and needing him to need me or something to that effect. And he just looks me dead ass in the face. And of all the emotional work he has had to do, because, and I say this with
Mhm.
pride, I have pushed him really, really hard. And he's been open to
Yes.
it. Really, he really,
Yes.
because I came from the opposite family where we talked about everything too much, way more intensely than it should have been. There was still learning for me to do, but I was like, we need to talk about it. We need to process it. You need to feel your feelings. You need to put them out in the space. But man, did he get me on this one because he said, I don't need you. And I was
I
like,
do remember this.
what? Oh yeah, it was bare. I was like, what the fuck are we doing then?
I
I
do
gave up my
remember
whole
this.
life to
Yes.
be here. I left the safety and security of my
Yes.
silent suffering shame bubble to be with you, and you don't need me. And he follows this up with, and now I realize what a gift it is, 12, 13 years later. I choose you.
Yes.
And in my head, needing me is an interdependence, which I have now learned is codependence.
Beautiful.
Choosing me, choosing me comes from his own volition. and the right that he has. And now we flip to the opposite side. My mom panics every time she hears about this because we talk about divorce all the time. Like, what would we do if we wanted to get a divorce? How would we want to handle this? We just bought a house. What would we do here? How
Just
would
a
we
side
navigate
note,
this with Everly?
Dave and I also discuss divorce often.
Yeah.
And
You
not in any context that we want to do it, because we
No.
both love each other very much. And we, he is my person, I am his. But
Yes.
I completely agree. Yes. And these
because it
conversations
has
need
to be
happen.
a choice.
Yes.
And if you don't choose it, then you get stuck in the cycle of codependency,
Yes,
of comfort, of all of these things. And so I
and that comfort place sure is a lovely place to sit and stew.
Well, because it's predictably crappy, because you know what to expect.
It's the same thing that you always say, is it is way easier to stay in your little comfort box.
Oh yeah.
Than it is to come out and make any sort of change.
Anything.
Yes.
Anything. And your brain's programmed against it. It's literally, and I use this all the time when I'm working with patients and talking about eating disorders, when they're so worried about their body and this fear of gaining weight infinitely. Like, do you know how lazy your body actually is? Your body is going to work so hard to stay at whatever set point it has. Like, you got to really commit. And I say that with kindness and compassion, and knowing that people have, brain addictions and disorders that change their body, but it's this fear of all these things. Your body is lazy when it comes to change, and particularly when it comes to change that requires vulnerability. It's not going to want to do it because it's scary. It's being in the middle of, it's Hunger Games, being in an open field and not knowing who else is out there watching you.
Yep. Well, look at how difficult it is just to start a workout plan.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about lazy body. Like, it takes weeks to become good at a push-up.
Yeah.
And so, the physical vulnerability is real too.
Yes.
And
yes.
Anything, the most difficult thing to do in your life is change.
Yeah.
This is a conversation I have regularly at work. This is one that's on the revolving docket of pointless conversations.
Well, but it's interesting because I think, so the tying this back to the idea of then, what does it mean to shift this into values-driven living? So I was also very recently humbled by your mom. It was another drop kick I wasn't expecting, and I really wanted to tell her to fuck off.
She's gotten pretty sneaky lately. She's got a whole plethora of things now.
Well, and now she'll use stuff that I've said to her years ago against me. And I'm like, this is the downside of spending too much time together.
I love
now
that.
You can say this. And I was really struggling one day because similarly, I'll get that same idea of like, I manage our lives. I manage our house. I do all these things. I don't even think Jordan knows where to get, well, he knows her doctor, but like, I don't know if he would know how to do this or what's this. And like, does he know what time she has lunch? Does he, like, basic things? Because now I'm the one that does it all. There is this sort of self-inflated importance that again fulfills my ego, which wants to be in control, because then it's safe. I'm safe because now I'm going to be needed because I'm responsible for everything.
Yep.
But then what you also do is you minimize the ways that they contribute to a full life. And this is absolutely, I think specifically, like, we're thinking Dave and Jordan, our partners, but this is true of the people that work for us, our kids, our friends. And I was saying something the other day about, all this stuff that I had to do. And part of where I struggle too is because I work from home and I am the one that's with Everly more. It's easier for my stuff to get a little bit eroded, whereas Jordan like can't not be in the emergency department.
It's exactly the same situation that Dave and I have. It's exactly the same.
He's got to be out of the house.
And I have all the flexibility in the world, for the most part. I would say probably about 80% flexibility. But yeah, exactly the same.
Well, and so then we've worked hard to get to a point where we can have this life. Worked really hard to be flexible, to have it. But then we're resentful that then that's being used in these ways and everything we have to take care of. And so I'm complaining about something. I don't even know if it was complaining. I think I was processing, or maybe I'm just trying to like throw some glitter on it.
You can call it whatever you want.
Yeah, something more productive. But she said, well, isn't it great?
Oh no. I know exactly what you're going to say.
Isn't it great that you guys have such different skills?
I
was like,
mother.
All right, Leanne, Mic
Oh,
drop. Now get
mom.
the fuck out of my house, because I did not want to hear that. And that is so true. And
Oh my
it's
goodness.
not
You
even
did
just,
that. You
I know,
100%
I
did that. You
know,
created this monster.
I know. And I take full credit for it. And in most respects, I have a lot of pride and joy in that, because that was
It
your mom's
honestly,
worked her butt off.
it's brilliant. It is. It is.
Oh man, but did that, like, it's still right now, I'm like feeling
Oof.
my armpits tingle and start to bead sweat,
Did you
because
just
it
want
is
to punch her in the
so,
face?
oh, 100%. I told her I wanted
Just,
to punch her.
you better walk away right now, because I'm going to hold my fist out. And if you run into it, that is a you problem.
Oh, well, and she's like, we've talked about how the number of times we'll have a conversation and I'll say something and she's like, feels that gut punch. And I was like, you just did that to me. And it was this, again, we get so good. And there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Jordan's going to listen to this episode and laugh at me, because as soon as he taught me what this was, it was like the thing I
Became your
teach
new
everybody
obsession.
now.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's basically when you know enough about something that you're dangerous. So
Oh, he
somebody,
loves that. Yes.
uh-huh.
Yes. 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 He
So
used to.
somebody that
So
knows,
I'm glad he
like,
found a title for that, because
yeah,
that's what he used to say is, and she just knows enough to be dangerous. So I'm glad he found a title
exactly.
for it.
And it is this actual thing that, and he experienced it in medicine. Like when you're learning, you first start med school and you're like, I fucking got this. And you like,
Yeah.
get ready for residency.
Yep.
And then you start as a resident, you're like, I don't got this. And the same thing
No,
happens
this is
as
hard.
a
I don't want to.
yeah.
Yep.
But it is that piece of, I think sometimes it's not the exact effect, but we know this stuff enough that we get so good at talking ourselves into the fact that we've already done this and we know this and we're not the ones that are
Yes.
struggling with the same things.
Yes.
And
Yep.
again, then it's easier to fixate on everybody else. But I do this all the time. I will, when he was working, he worked like 8 days out of 10, right? When we were packing up, getting ready to move, my mom was
Ay,
here.
ay,
Ev and
ay.
I were both sick. I was dealing with all these other issues. By the end of that time, I had made a case that basically Jordan was garbage, like as a human.
Oh.
It was bad. I was like, he didn't even know I was sick. But because he asked me one morning, how are you feeling? I was like, fucking terrible. I've been sick for several days. So is your daughter. Because he just didn't know. He wasn't around. And my mom
Right.
goes, how hard must that be for him to hear that and know that he couldn't be there for you?
What
And
is
again,
with
I
our
was like, all right.
mothers?
Well, they
Come on.
stopped using their avoidance strategies and started doing the
Man, oh,
work. And now they're
man.
using it. And the point, I think, of like all of this for you and I, because this is obviously, we'll see what happens in 6 months when we record another episode and where we're at. But it's like, what I need to get to a point at is saying, you and I could both catalog all the things that we do for other people. I think there is this spot we have to get to again of saying, to what end? Who am I really doing it for? Because if I am doing it to fulfill that sense of having a need, if I am doing it to feel better about myself, that's my ego. That's not my value.
Yes.
Because my value is
Correct.
about
Yes, absolutely.
sort of interrelation with me and other people.
Yep.
But then second, if it is my value, and this is the part I'm really working on, is then I have to be okay that not everybody else functions the same as me. Jordan is never, ever. Last night, we were both, we're, I don't know, 6% into what it means to move into this house. And I am unloading and unboxing and doing stuff. And he's sitting there watching the Bucks game. And I looked at him and for a brief moment, I was like, what the fuck? Seriously? And then I paused and I was like, he has every right to choose to spend his time doing that. Me being frustrated because I am making a choice right now that nobody asked me to make, to organize our house, because in my mind, I'm doing this to make everything easier. I want the house to feel smooth. I want people to feel settled. I want Jordan to be okay. Oh, well, it's going to be a long one.
Because it needs to be an anthem, because that is exactly, that is, and I try so hard to talk myself off that ledge, because that is the dialogue right there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is, how dare you sit there and do nothing while I'm busting my butt to get XYZ done. And you don't even care about the fact that this house is in disarray and we're living in squalor and there's so much to do. And you're going to watch the Bucks? Are you kidding me? Yes, it is continual. That replays in my head pretty much every time I see someone not doing what I'm doing. Whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whatever the case, I am always doing and they are never doing.
Yeah. Which again, and it's you projecting your way of functioning onto everybody else.
Yes.
And then making the assumption that, again, this is where that comfort of having to do and be it all is, because then we're doing it my way.
Right.
I am responsible
Which
for
is the right
everything.
way. I mean,
Right,
let's be
exactly.
honest.
Right.
Come on.
That's where the righteous anger comes from.
Absolutely.
And then I have every reason to blame it on everybody else that I feel lonely, burnt out, exhausted, all of these things that are too scary for me to address. Because if you all could just get up and do the other things, then it would be okay.
Just do what I do. Why is it so difficult?
Then I'd be fine.
Why can't you just be me?
Right.
What's the problem here?
Instead of saying, I don't need them to need me. I don't need to be moving at all points in time.
Ooh, wow.
I know.
I don't know about that one.
I got a couple more. See how they land.
Okay.
Everybody doesn't need me to take care of them. Their idea of a full life is not the same as mine.
Are these mantras you're going to be selling on tarps and shirts?
Well, no, that's the baseline of the t-shirt. That's the part.
Oh, beautiful. Right okay, excellent.
On the butt at the end.
We need some. Yeah. Oh, you could do. Yeah, you could do the new style of joggers, not the juicy on the butt, but like all of your little taglines there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are difficult mantras. Those are mantras I probably would have to say thousands of times before I believe them. So when do you get to the point where you believe what you're saying? Because you can say whatever you want out loud, you know, you can chant till the cows come home, but the bottom line is at some point you have to believe what you're saying.
I think the one thing that I'm doing that's helping, at least for now, but I would say I'm still only maybe 2% of the way through the process of, in the book Burnout by the Nagoski sisters, they name this as called human giver syndrome. And they talk very specifically about the patriarchy and all of these pieces in there. And I'll put a link in the show notes for people because you should definitely check this out. One of the things that I sort of took as I was reading that, I started to really think about is I do feel safer when I feel in control. And I think everybody does, but particularly when we've gone through different trauma points, we feel better. That's why I love romantic comedies. That's why I literally cry every time things work out, because it is the biggest dopamine hit I could ever have, because my brain just wants predictability and security. I
secretly like romantic comedies. Don't tell Dave.
It is definitely not secret. You also love Disney more than you want anybody to know.
Absolutely. I love Disney. Are you kidding me? I used to have the cassettes of the soundtracks.
Just wait till we actually get to do
I totally would have done the Disney karaoke. Well, I'll be out there in May, so
I know. We're going to have to do it for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that what I start to do now is to say, okay, how can I use my drive for being in control for me instead of against me? Like for me instead of, I guess, for my shame. And so what I do in those moments when I feel that way is I ask myself 2 questions. 1, how does this thought about, and I'm just using Jordan as an example because I see him the most. It happens about him the most. And I get him about everly, but she's 3, so I can really,
it's a tough one.
Yeah. But I ask myself, if this is really about my values, is this thought and feeling me in alignment with my values? And when I have a feeling that is mean, judgmental, breeds resentment, it kind of feeds into that, the answer is no. So I ask myself, really, like, gut check. How are these feelings serving my values and who I really want to be? And then the second question, go ahead.
No, go.
The second question I ask myself is, am I doing this because I feel like I have to, or am I doing this because I choose to? And if really the point is I'm choosing to, then I go back to the first question and say, then I have to let it go.
So this came up for me, 2 weeks ago. I have an employee who got hurt at work, and after the first week, we got into the second week of her being gone because she ended up having a hairline fracture in her heel, and so she really couldn't do anything. And we're a preschool. I need people on their feet, so. You coming in and sitting at the desk whining about how bad your foot hurts, not really going to do it for me, right?
Yeah.
So I just said, you know what, we're going to take these 2 weeks off. We're going to let you get into the orthopedic surgeon and find out what's going on. And then we'll, move forward from there. So within that 2 weeks, the first week was, man, I hope she gets better. I hope she's okay. Second week comes, what the fuck? What is she doing?
Yeah.
Why is she
that was happening?
And she's sending text messages to my other employees, reminding them about like their shifts that they're currently working in that week. They're, reminding them to be aware of staying, not getting overtime. And all I can think in my head, and I said it out loud and I shouldn't have said it out loud. I wish I would have had your questions. I said, why the fuck are you texting them? I got this. I'm fine. I don't need you coming in from your couch at home telling my employees that they need to pay attention to their overtime when I'm the one scheduling them. So I did respond to her in that situation. And I did let her know that her text message was not necessary. And that, I've got the schedule. This employee and I have discussed this. I did have to delete some text messages that I luckily didn't send. So I did at least let myself breathe for a few minutes and get through that. But all I can think in my head is, would you mind your own business, please? You are literally sitting on your couch at home. We're busting our hump, filling the gaps because you're not here. And you're going to pipe up about overtime that doesn't even affect you because you don't own the business. So,
do you want to know where my thought went when you said this?
Yes, I do.
How interesting that it infuriates you when someone else needs to feel needed. Because my wonder, particularly knowing how you function, she's gone. She's got at least a week off. She wasn't planning for that. It's not like she's excited about it.
No, and I did remind myself of that regularly, she did not injure herself on purpose.
And you told her to do these things.
I did. I scheduled it this way. I did.
And her fear is then becoming irrelevant.
Yes. Yep.
And you, when your ego and your shame shows up, because she stomped on your shame territory,
yes.
You have to be the one in control. You have to be the one that's got this. Don't you help me. I don't need your help.
To kind of like give this a little context, she is currently in training for a management position.
Yeah.
So I am currently training her to essentially take over what I'm doing.
Yep. And then she tries to do it. Yep.
Yeah. And in that 2-week window, I panicked. I took scheduling away from her, which I gave back to her today because I told her, I was like, that was irrational and unnecessary. And I'm sorry I did that. You can be responsible for it. I completely believe in you. You are totally fine there. But yeah.
Well, and the second part, I also know we're like, we could keep talking. So I know we're getting close to time. So we'll have to kind of, everybody stay tuned. Part 2 through 38 are going to be coming in upcoming episodes.
We could be doing this daily and we would get it all out.
I know. This is what happened the first time we met. And we were like, let's just get coffee. And it was
what was that? 9 hours?
Yeah. Multiple places closing down before we ended. But I think what's interesting too is when you said earlier, no one's doing that for me. No one's paying attention to what I need or asking these questions. You also have to wonder, this person who's being trained to be in a management role, who's aware of what it's like to be in a preschool every day and is aware of the effect of what it means when somebody's out and out for a prolonged period of time that you weren't accounting for. Because you all had to go through this with COVID, you had to go through all these things. So she knows this, she's weathered this storm. So also, she might be reading the room of, hey, Jess is going to be pretty overwhelmed and this sucks. And I feel pretty helpless and I can't be in the classroom right now. What could I take off her plate or what could I take off the team's plate while I'm on the couch? So this might have been her trying to do the thing that you say nobody's doing.
And staying relevant, like you said, like
exactly.
that's very
and
real.
Then it's a threat. And those are all those pieces where what you did just now by talking about it, by going through it internally on your own, circling back to it, talking through it, thinking through all these pieces, that is the only thing we can do to start to learn a different response. It's first mining our everyday life for opportunities to learn about our responses and where they're reactions out of shame, which that was a shame-based reaction. And then you go, what threat did she enact in me? And again, it was that threat of, I can handle everything. I need to be able to handle everything and to prove to God knows who
I can't help but laugh when you say that, because it's so interesting to me to be so hyper aware of this, this headspace that you put yourself in. And I am so hyper aware. I tell people all the time. I tell incoming employees about how to navigate my brain. So, but yet it never seems to go away.
It will. But so this is like, have you done a cold plunge yet?
God, no.
Okay.
That sounds terrible.
I did one on my birthday. They are terrible.
Yeah, that sounds like my nightmare. Meanwhile, I'm in the shower and there's steam billowing out.
Oh no, I love that. That's my preference. We've been dealing with the fact that our shower is the only thing that doesn't get like scalding hot here. And I was like, Jordan's trying to fix it right now, like, tinkering with the water heater settings and stuff. And I'm like, I'm gonna be real sad if I don't want to live here anymore because my shower doesn't get warm.
Can we not mess with that? Did you guys just leave it on the cold?
Oh, but so when we went to this place for my birthday, and there's a sauna, there's like a sort of a room temp kind of pool, then there's the hot tub, and then there's the cold pool. And I mean, people get in it and they're in it for a long time. Obviously, everybody knows this is like a big trend and fad, and it does amazing things. The cold water activates what's called the mammalian dive reflex.
I do know that.
Incredible.
Yeah. Yes.
It helps with so many things. So as I'm preparing for it, I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Here's my plan. I'm going to get into it. I'm going to be super successful. And this is how I'm going to get into the pool. And I'm going to go kind of at a rapid pace here. And if I just kind of like hop down the steps, like getting into the pool versus like go slowly, then I'm not going to talk myself out. No, he didn't. But I basically pushed myself in, because what I had to realize is what you're describing right now. Like, I do these things. When is it going to go away? It will not go away as long as you keep perfecting and mowing the lawn of that little blade of perfection. You have to be vulnerable. The vulnerability was saying, look, I have prepped for this. I have gone through guided visualizations of how cold I'm going to be and how it's very temporary and it's going to be fine. I can talk through everything about it. I can touch the water with my fingertips and know what it is. I can all these things, but at some point I have to jump in the fucking pool if I want to get in the pool.
Right. Yes.
And so for you, I think this is that transition from knowing to doing. You are very knowledgeable about it, but you aren't taking any risks. So now you have to take the risk.
No, that's vulnerable. Gross.
So then the answer to your question of when does this get better is never. It will not. And this is your life.
So you either like it or you don't.
Yeah. But it is, unfortunately, it's that realization of like, I think the flip side too is to also release the story. It's not woe is me, but it's woe is me adjacent.
Yes.
People want to be there for us. People love us. People do really want to show up. And when we get stuck in our shame, we get this all or nothing feeling of like, nobody's here for me. I have to do all of it. Everything is my responsibility. That none of those things are true. It's just about releasing that hold to say, this is scary and hard and I don't like it. And I've lived my life telling myself I have to be protected against people rejecting me and leaving me, whether it is my partner walking away, my kids not wanting to be around me, my business closing, my employees hating me, my friends leaving, whatever it is. And now we have to start to collect the data that says we don't have any proof this is going to happen. You've come up with a hypothesis and then said it was true without running any experiments. And so you have to walk it back and run the experiments.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that. I know all those things.
I know you know it. Now you have to do it. And
Now
we
I have
just
to do
have to
it.
do it more together. It's and the example of like, don't say anything to Dave about the room.
I won't. We'll see. And honestly, that's probably one of the most easy experiments we could do because
Yeah.
it's my mom coming.
Perfect.
So who cares?
Right.
Really.
Right.
It does go back to the fact that I was the one who remodeled our whole house and was, essentially the navigator of all of those moving parts. And now he's in this room and he's making it yucky and I don't like it. And it's not the room I wanted it to be, but it's his room. And we agreed to that. And so I don't come in here. Like I could come in here regularly and put that man's clothes away.
Yeah.
I could come in here and tidy this room. But I don't. And and I don't feel angry about it or disregarded about it or anything like that. If this was our bedroom, he wouldn't be doing this. He would be putting his things away. But it's like what you said, at the beginning that, we take up the most space that we can and then he'll rein it in if he needs to. So, those little things that is definitely something that comes up more so at work than it does at home because we've all kind of figured out our roles in our home. It took us a lot of years to get there, but we, have pretty much figured that stuff out. So it is my internal work. It is my, being okay with people making decisions and having some faith and really being able to trust the fact that, these women that I work with, I've been working with them for more than a decade. They know what they're doing. And it's the same thing that I say to incoming families who are touring our program that, I have nothing but good things to say about my team because they are amazing women and they know exactly what they're doing. They might do it differently, but they do ultimately know exactly what they need to do to get the job done. And it also brings up for me, and I actually just mentioned this at work today, if I am not the director, if I am not the one running the day-to-day program, what am I doing? I don't know what's next. And that part scares me. That part is that unsureness of having too much time on my hands. Like, what? No, that sounds terrible to me. That sounds like I'm going to go into a deep spiral hole of doing nothing.
Well, I think it's such a beautiful sort of way for us to, I guess, maybe not wrap up because like we said, this is going to be another 38 episodes that we'll do, or I didn't do the math, 36. But there's this really awesome, I don't know if you have the Little Spot books at school. If you don't, you should definitely get them. So it's like a little spot of worry, a little spot of empathy, a little spot of belonging. Yeah, they're fucking fantastic. And there's a book called A Little Spot of Boredom. And I, no joke, had a coaching client a couple weeks ago that I ran to Everly's room and did a book reading of the whole book and just sat there showing her the pictures and everything. And I was like, I don't want this to feel patronizing to you. And she goes, this is the most helpful 10 minutes that I have had. And so we're just going through, but there's this idea of doing is also, if I run fast enough, I'm going to outrun all these feelings I've told myself I can't handle.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm going to stop myself from having to feel the pain that's there. But one of the things that happens too is doing all the time erodes any sense of ability for our brain to wonder, to explore, to create. And so there's something called no task boredom, and then there's something called task boredom. And task boredom is, we've all had jobs where we hate doing whatever it is.
Yeah, mine's payroll every week. That's my task boredom.
Exactly.
Drives me crazy. I get very distracted by pretty much everything.
And, teenagers in high school, whatever the classes that they hate, mine was history, and it's task boredom. You're constantly finding a way not to do something. That there's a different response to it. But what you're describing is a fear of no task boredom, which is, what do I do when there's nothing to do? Which means, again, it's rooted to the shame. I mean, if I don't have something to do, I'm not relevant. But what we know is that your brain can only experience the creative spark and flexible thinking when you have opportunities for no task boredom. And so I think your next step isn't so much how do I figure out what I want to do next, but how do I learn to tolerate the distress of not knowing what I want to do next and move forward anyways? And
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
the scary part. That is the part where I think both of us could do a better job of saying, it's so much easier to leap if I know where the next rock is going to be. It's so much
Right.
easier
Yes.
to
What am I
jump
jumping
in if,
to?
exactly.
Yeah. I don't want to jump into
Instead
the
of,
pool.
right. No, right. Because it's the cold pool underneath. So you
Yeah.
need to know that there's
No,
a
no,
landing
thank you.
spot somewhere.
No, thank you.
But that's the shift from preparedness and resilience to hypervigilance and shame-based living, is saying, I'm going to just jump and know that even if I got into the water, I'm going to be fine. And you have that in you. It's now just learning to trust it enough. And when people are living differently, it's kind of like, I know you and I both have watched New Girl, and it's when Schmidt and Cece buy a house. It's Schmidt letting her have the really ugly ceiling fan or
Yeah.
the doorbell that played La Cucaracha. Like,
Yep.
letting people have their own mark in the world, because as much as it brings you joy, when we were moving in here and I had the red awful room that we repainted and I called it ugly, and Everly, my fucking 3-year-old, schooled me. That's basically what this whole episode is me being schooled by everybody in my life. The therapist being told, you need to get your shit together.
That's because you've trained them well.
Yeah. Well, it's way more comfortable being on this side, as you and I both know.
Yes.
But she told me when I called the room ugly, she said, not everybody thinks that's ugly.
Oh, abs.
And she told me not to use that word. And I was like, damn,
somebody had to paint that wall.
I know. And so then I'm like, oh my gosh. And so it is that idea of realizing one of the reasons why we have such an intolerant culture is the narrow-minded view that it has to be a certain way. And it doesn't come from a belief that everybody else's way is bad or shitty or terrible. It comes from a belief of, if it's not my way, then what have I been doing my whole life? And it's a threat to my system.
I'm not enough. I'm not
exactly
doing it right. Yes.
Exactly. Okay. As we get to this point, we're at, I don't know, again, bookmark it. We'll come back. We'll dive deeper. We'll explore more of this. I think coming back and talking about this at work, so many other areas. But let's just say for now, given episode 1 that we've recorded together, what is one word you would use to describe how you feel now as we sit here?
Curious. Yep. I think curious. I'm curious to see where this goes, because I always take away from our conversations some little nugget of wisdom to move forward with. So I think I'm curious to see how my interactions go with said employee moving forward, because I do ultimately trust her. So I have to figure out, what that looks like for me, and what those responses really should be. Yeah. And kind of just tapping into more of the empathetic piece of it and not being so annoyed by things occurring.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing I'm struggling with still is, how do we just let people know how we felt in a moment and why we acted the way we did? And I wonder what gift that might even be to share that of, I didn't know it at the time, but my brain perceived what you did as a threat, and the safest thing to do is to shut it down. And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
leaving it there, and not having to explain it, explore it, come up with a plan around it. Just, that's what it was. I just want to tell you.
It was a blip in the matrix.
Exactly.
It was a whoops. Sorry.
Well, I'm super, super glad that we did this. I think, like you said, if nothing else, we just get uninterrupted time to chat, and I'm pumped to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's now pretend, because we know that we're recording this, you'll hear it, in a few months. When you listen to this, what do you want that Jessica to have held on to, or to remember, or to be called back to remember when she hears this?
The boredom chunk that we talked about resonated pretty heavily for me. So, knowing that I'm a 100% all the time, until I crash, knowing that is my personality, I would say probably, yeah, just being able to maybe paint a picture again one day, do something in the creative realm, because God knows that stuff doesn't happen much, which
Yeah.
sounds like there's a reason it's not happening much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's that piece of recognizing when something fits. And if that Jessica was ready to have the conversation, but wasn't ready to implement it, maybe an invitation to say, let's make some space for this now, if we
Yeah.
haven't yet done so. Well, this was lovely. For everybody that is listening, just remind yourself, as Jess and I are both sharing, we've been navigating these discussions for 13 years together and years apart even before that. This is a long road. As we know, shame is something that we live with. We're not getting rid of it. We're not combating it. What we're doing is learning, how do we live with it in a way that it doesn't constantly drive the bus? So stay tuned for another episode. We drop them every single Sunday, and I can't wait to dive into our next topic with you next week. Probably. You wouldn't fit in the closet?
My head hit the shelf, so I couldn't lean back against the wall.
Oh, yeah. Then you're
okay,
in an
recording in
uncomfortable position.
progress. Got it. Okay.
You said okay?
Yeah.
All right. This is also, there's going to be a couple episodes in there that I'm going to re-listen to, and I'm going to go, oh yeah, that's when I had a sinus infection, because I sound real rough. I'm editing videos for a company I'm doing stuff for right now, and I'm listening to all of them, and I was like, oh yeah, that's bad. But fuck it. Who cares?
Sultry.
They're
It's
getting me.
sultry.
Yeah. It's not though. Like, it's not the sexy voice. It's like a back. I can't
Like
even do it.
in the nasal,
like in the throat a little bit like this as I'm talking. It's
like you
very
really
rough.
need to blow your nose like 900.
Yeah. I mean, I did. I kept doing it and then had to edit that out too. So I should have just kept it so they had context of what was
Absolutely.
happening. Okay, I'm ready. Are you ready?
Okay.
I'm shaking it up.
I'm good.
Okay.